Another meeting on school safety at the White House today as Congress moves to take action. President Trump winning some rare praise from the Senate's top Democrat for signaling he's open to changing our nation's gun laws.
I'd like to give credit where credit is due. The president said a lot of things right yesterday. He seemed to strongly endorse universal background checks to ensure that people who shouldn't have a gun don't have access to one. Importantly, the president acknowledged that taking meaningful steps to improve gun safety is going to require bucking the NRA. So, the meeting and the president's comments were an encouraging step.
Schumer unveiled a three-part gun control plan from Democrats today. He insists a ban on assault weapons be part of the Senate debate. Marco Rubio pitched his own set of proposals, including confiscating guns from those who pose a threat. President Trump supports that idea, but not the NRA.
I like taking the guns early, like in this crazy man's case that just took place in Florida. He had a lot of firearms. They saw everything. To go to court would have taken a long time. Take the guns first, go through due process second.
There's a way that you can respect and protect due process and protect the rights of millions of Americans while also hardening our schools and keeping kids safe.
So, Greg, Senator Schumer said that they will introduce a bill and that they expect that it's possible. I'm sorry, I just came in, so I'm reading it off my phone. Could pass Schumer's proposal with mostly Democratic support and a few Republicans encouraged by President Trump. Your thoughts?
Not going to happen. That bill isn't going to happen. I can safely say that with that language, it's not going to work. I think what President Trump was trying to get at, and he used, I think, imprecise language, is he's talking about a database for what he calls the crazy guys, a database where if school officials and police officers notice something wrong, it's not about due process. Actually, that is the due process. They say this person is a threat, but he hasn't violated any laws yet. But they say this is a threat. There needs to be a database for that, where that person goes, and then you figure it out later. But at that point, there's no gun, and it's in a civil court. So there's a low bar, and you can go and get a judge to get, do a court order. I think that's what he's getting at, but I don't know. And I think that's a smart move because I think that makes sense, along with, hardening soft targets and dealing with the mentally ill. These are all practical things. I think what the Dems are doing, which is very smart, is they're piling their other stuff on there because and they're saying they're lauding him. Whenever you get praise from a liberal, you should be very worried. But I think we've talked about this before. If there's a Republican who moves to the middle, you know it's going to be Trump because he's a populist. And when a populist hears somebody say, don't take away my guns, he'll say, I'm with you. And then if somebody else says, get those guns away from those creeps, he'll say, I'm with you. Because a populist is with the popular opinion. And if the population has two different opinions, he will say yes to both of them.
Well, I think what's happening, too, is that, Jesse, there's the conversation that's happening in Washington, and that conversation might not actually lead to legislation, but there is movement in the states. So, for example, Rick Scott, the governor of Florida, they've passed a law to increase the age to 21 in terms of purchase, and he's going to dedicate $500 million to harden all the schools. That's a huge commitment for a state when you could spend it on a lot of other things.
That's an enormous commitment, and he's feeling a lot of heat down there in Florida. It looks like he's doing the right thing so far. I do get nervous when Crying Chuck endorses something. It makes me run in the other direction. But in this case, I think with the president, when he was using imprecise language, as you would say, it's a gun violence restraining order. So if someone hasn't committed a crime or hasn't been involuntarily committed to a mental institution, but is killing animals and acting crazy and beating up his mother and is a mess like the kid was in Florida, you go to a judge, there's due process, you say, let's prevent him from buying a weapon or take the weapon away. Rubio supports this legislation. I don't see anything wrong with that. In terms of the Promise program they want to redo, these cops were dealing with this violent, ridiculous person down there causing mayhem, and they weren't treating him like a criminal. Sometimes you have to treat an 18-year-old high school kid like a criminal and stop suspending him and putting him in timeout and maybe actually make him pay the price. The background checks, I can agree with. I think that's common sense. It's all about sharing information, whether it's you're suspended for violence, whether it's a crisis at your house and you've been called to the police 55 times or whatever it is. Put that into some sort of system and make sure everybody has access to it. The raising the age limits, I'm still a little wishy-washy. I haven't decided yet. I see the one hand, you don't want an 18-year-old person maybe to get a gun, but at the same time, an AR, at the same time, that wouldn't have prevented most of these mass shootings.
Right.
Most of these mass shootings are people above 18, and if you're a hunter, if you like sports shooting, and you're in a rural state, why deny them their constitutional rights? I don't get that.
Juan, is there something that the Democrats are seeing either in focus groups or polling or gut instinct that they think this is an issue that is ripe now for them to be able to put forward this law and say, well, we might be able to actually pass it?
No, to the contrary. I mean, the politics of gun control in this country are pretty clear, which is it's most Americans who favor, as Jesse just said, universal background checks, closing gun show loopholes, going after assault weapons. It's gun owners and non-gun owners. But remember,
I didn't say going after assault weapons. I don't think I said
Okay, no, I'm saying that.
Okay.
I'm still confused by the gun show loophole that I keep hearing about.
Most Americans favor doing away with assault weapons. But the thing is that gun owners are single vote type of people. I mean, they will vote on a single issue, and that's guns. People who favor gun control are not single issue voters, and therefore their opposition is diluted. But in this moment, with the young people down in Florida leading the way, I think you're seeing a shift in opinion. And the question is whether or not the shift is on the right. And I think that's why, pretty much like Greg said, Senator Ben Sass in Nebraska said, the president's reflecting the last person to talk to him. And then you have people like Breitbart saying, oh, it's Trump's gun grab. So you see the people on the right reacting as if, oh, my God, what's Trump doing? But people on the Democratic side or on the left are like, well, let him do what he wants to do. But he's got a fight among people who supported him in 2016. And even with the plans that he's put forward, can it get 60 votes in the Senate without strong Republican support? Can it get 218 in the House? That's the question.
That's Kimberly why I said that maybe if I'm not saying legislation can't pass this year, but it is unlikely, I think, that it would pass this year. But in the states, you're doing things, you're seeing things, and also the market is sort of dealing with some of this. Yesterday, Walmart said that it would no longer, that it was raising the age limit to 21 for its stores. And also Kroger said the same thing, which I didn't know that they sold guns there. I thought that was like a grocery store.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think definitely something you said I found to be very interesting, which was maybe there is kind of like a bit of a shift, and perhaps maybe in some sense on the right. And certainly we're seeing a little bit with, the president. He's trying to be very open-minded, listen to both sides, evaluate the situation, because perhaps with the young people that were so personally and tragically affected by this, it has changed a little bit of the tone and the willingness to listen, to try to do something better, because it's not politicians, although some of them were motivated in certain ways by different, parental ideology and whatnot. But that's what I think people are listening. Well, it's not this congressman or this Republican or this Democrat. It's people who are there who experience loss and tragedy and suffering, and they're being real in terms of how they experienced it and genuine in terms of wanting to do something about it. Because even the First Lady commented on that, that it's good the children are using their voice and they're trying to get it out there to do something so it doesn't happen again to somebody else. And that's why I think you see the president making this shift.
Yesterday, Michael Hammond, he's the legislative counsel for Gun Owners of America, Greg, he said, talking about the president, we believe he's gone from, in his own words, the Second Amendment's best friend to the gun grabber in chief, and that had Trump not run on support of the Second Amendment, he would not be president of the United States today.
Those could both be true. We knew this when we talked on the 5. He had very, I would say, center liberal beliefs for a long time about guns, and then he went. He knew who he had to please. But this is what it's like when you get a populist, and for better or for worse, there are people who are very pro-populist, but you never know what the next day is going to bring because it's based on popular opinion. Here's my concern. What worries me is we're going to end up punishing law-abiding citizens. Yeah. Not just in guns, though, but in other arenas. For example, if you think, if you decide to rig the system to make it harder for law-abiding citizens to get guns, you're not targeting the actual troubled, the nuts, right? The civil tax system targets the people who need to be targeted. You put them in a database. I'm seeing this happening with opioids right now. Donald Trump talking about suing the government, suing pharmacies, pharmaceutical companies. So they're targeting law-abiding citizens because of a tiny percentage of abuse, right? They're going to go after the companies that create the drugs, and they're going to make it harder for cancer patients and people with illnesses to get opioids because there's abuse. Now, there's a small amount of abuse. It is a parallel argument to guns. The overwhelming majority of people who have guns are law-abiding citizens. The people that use legal medications are law-abiding people with cancer, with pain disorders. We are punishing people by creating by going after the system than actually going after the system abusers.
Well, I think we are going after the idea that there's been such a proliferation of guns in American society.
So has there been medications? But do you see my point?
No, I got
there
your
is a
point, but I'm just
proliferation of legal medications.
There's a difference between a medication that actually has a purpose in terms of healing your body.
A gun has a purpose.
Well, a gun might have a purpose in terms of, you could say, self-defense, for example. Right.
It is.
But I'm saying to you that in other societies, people are able to defend themselves, and we have a problem with mass murders in the society.
It's been on the decline, you know that, since the 90s. But
anyway. My argument is that when you get the gun owners of America, which is to the right of the NRA, don't forget that. They're more radical than the NRA on guns. So they are now putting pressure on the NRA. So can the NRA say, you know what, Mr. President, as apparently that's what he said they told him in the lunch, we're willing to do something. We understand we want to make our nation safer, our children safer, as Kimberly was saying. But can they say that out loud without getting, whiplash from the gun owners?